Teardrop. The series will take you through fictional episodes from the viewpoints of Trisha and Vikrant. Sometimes it's the same situation from their respective perspectives, and sometimes their shared journey. Chapter 13. Finding Safety in the Darkness of the Night. Trisha. Night equaled sleep. Restful, peaceful, and full of dancing unicorns over rainbows to the background of gurgling brook and mountain streams. She was an early morning person. She would be fresh as the freshest loaf of bread that a bakery can churn out for its earliest customers. Light on her feet, she would load up her day with work that could easily be scheduled for at least a month later. Evening meant she had to be home. As a child, evening meant that she had to witness the fights that ensued between her parents. So, she decided to create a world where love prevailed over matters like excessive salt in the dinner or that the TV show that mother preferred to watch was not up to the father's standards. Even in her made-up world, she worked very hard, devising new scenarios of happiness. There were travels involved, chasing butterflies was a popular theme, and baking delicious, decadent cakes with exotic icing was the cherry on top of her daydreaming. Only, she did her share of daydreaming at night till sleep blanketed her in its safety. As teenage approached, nights were filled with music blaring into her ears as she found more ways of blocking out the high decibel toing and froing of words between her progenitors. She created a chimera out of all the romantic heroes she encountered in the books that were a refuge to her and her thoughts. Death announced its first victim in form of a father. She grew up overnight. Trisha realized that life waited for none. The dead were lucky. They won freedom from the rigors of routine, or at least that's what she hoped for the deceased souls. The living, in her opinion, were pitiable for they were still slaves to routine and did not enjoy the luxury of stopping the mundane to mourn the greatest of losses. The chimera she had crafted grew up with her, having her own share of ups and downs. They would spend the nights together scheming ways to create a fantasy universe where the sun and its family of planets would revolve around them and them alone, till sleep rescued her. The wondrous monster that she had created kept her company through her 20s. She was unaware that another mutant lurked nearby to lurch out towards her. The fag end of her 20s were not too kind on her or her mother. There was one night in particular that set the benchmark of low points in her life. She doesn't remember for how long she slept or whether she slept at all that night. She kept waking up in jerks, and even sleep, her best friend till now, failed to shelter her heart. She forced her eyes to adjust to the dim light as soon as possible and then would stare at the patient lying on the white sheet that covered the adjustable hospital bed. She would look at her bald head. Her mother's eyes had become deep black holes in her skull. The nose looked much bigger than before and was marked with big black spots. Her mother's mouth would be open and she would strain her ears to listen to the sound of snores. There would be no sound in the room in the dead of the night, except for the fan, which would be set to run at an excruciatingly low speed. She would panic. Tears would sting her eyes. She had fought the urge to break down several times that night. After the first wave of panic, she would steady herself and stare at her mother's chest, hoping that the movement of the breasts would lay her fears to rest. But her mother had reduced to bones, and most of the times detecting any movement was next to impossible, and Trisha's heart would start racing again. She would then close her eyes and take a deep breath. She did that a lot that night. She would concentrate all her energies into observing her mother's stomach. Its slow and rhythmic rise and fall relaxed her momentarily. Her shoulders would drop, she would stretch and yawn and go back to sleep to wake up again in 5 minutes and repeat the exercise. She still wakes up sometimes. Her mother is much better now. She has a curly mop of hair on her head. But that frail, bald woman who smiled through all the suffering of battling cancer still comes to see Trisha sometimes during sleep. After that fateful night, her relationship with all things nocturnal had been strained. Till he arrived. She started being a morning person again. The annoying kind. The kind who's perky without a caffeine shot in the morning. The kind who dusts the knickknacks, arranges the things around the house, adjusts the tablecloths. The kind who makes beds and washes and then puts bundles of clothes to dry. The kind who cooked up a storm in the kitchen before the clock struck 9. Even on weekends and holidays. She started to look forward to the evenings and the nights. It was during the hours that followed twilight that they both met after spending an entire day in the company of people they didn't even particularly like. It was when even the sun could not take one more minute of doing its job of shining on the same set of people that they exchanged notes, anecdotes, frustrations, hugs, and deep, passionate kisses. She loved this time of the 24 hours that the world called a day. Dinner out of the way, the days Telly watched, they called it a night. With his arm securely around her waist, all was better with the world. Her nightmares were scared of him. He protected her happiness. She liked the night. She had him all to herself for the entire night.